Hello horror lovers, welcome to the channel. Before the terror begins, I want to ask you to subscribe to the channel, as it will help me a lot. Also, leave a comment telling me which city you're watching from, I'd love to know. Click the like button, all of this because the crisp autumn air filled my lungs as I hiked deeper into Blackwood Forest. Golden leaves crunched beneath my boots, and the scent of pine and decay mingled in the cool breeze. I'd been planning this solo camping trip for months, eager to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. As I reached a small clearing nestled between ancient oaks, I shrugged off my heavy backpack and surveyed the area. Perfect, I murmured to myself, a smile tugging at my lips. This would be my home for the next few days. I set about pitching my tent, the familiar routine calming my mind. The forest around me buzzed with life, birds chirping, squirrels scurrying through the underbrush, and the distant sound of a babbling brook. As I hammered the last stake into the ground, a sense of accomplishment washed over me. Home, sweet home, I chuckled, stepping back to admire my handiwork. The small, green tent stood proudly against the backdrop of towering trees and darkening sky. With daylight fading, I gathered wood for a fire. The repetitive motion of breaking branches and arranging them in the fire pit I'd created lulled me into a peaceful state. As the first stars began to twinkle above, I struck a match and watched as the flames slowly came to life, casting a warm glow across the clearing. Settling back in my camp chair, I pulled out my journal and began to write. Day 1 in Blackwood Forest, I penned, already feeling more at peace than I have in months. The solitude out here is exactly what I needed. As night fell in earnest, the forest grew eerily quiet. The cheerful bird song ceased, replaced by the occasional hoot of an owl or rustle of leaves. A cool wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a sense of unease that I couldn't quite shake. I glanced up from my journal, scanning the darkened woods around me. "Just your imagination, Jake," I muttered, trying to reassure myself. But the prickling sensation on the back of my neck persisted. Deciding to turn in early, I doused the fire and retreated to my tent. As I zipped up the entrance, I couldn't help but feel as though eyes were watching me from the shadows. I chuckled nervously. Come on, man. You wanted solitude, remember? Nothing out there but trees and critters. Inside my sleeping bag, I tried to relax, focusing on the gentle sounds of the forest night, the wind in the leaves, the distant call of a loon on some hidden lake. Slowly, my eyelids grew heavy, and I drifted off into an uneasy sleep. I'm not sure how long I slept before the sound jolted me awake. A blood-curdling howl pierced the darkness unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It wasn't a wolf or a coyote or any animal I could identify. The sound was primal, filled with hunger and rage. My heart raced as I sat up, fully alert now. "What the hell was that?" I whispered, straining my ears for any further noise. Silence fell once more, but it was a heavy silence, pregnant with anticipation. Then I heard it. Heavy footsteps approaching my tent. Whatever was out there, it was big. My hands trembled as I fumbled for my flashlight. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the cool night air. "Hello?" I called out, my voice cracking. "Is someone there?" No response came, save for the steady approach of those heavy footsteps. Leaves crunched, twigs snapped, each sound bringing the unknown visitor closer to my fragile shelter. I scrambled to the far side of the tent, flashlight clutched to my chest like a lifeline. My breath came in short, panicked gasps as a shadow fell across the tent wall, something large, something inhuman. "Please," I whimpered, though I wasn't sure what I was pleading for. Mercy? A swift end? For this all to be a nightmare I'd soon wake from? A low growl rumbled through the air, so close it seemed to vibrate through my very bones. Then, in a blur of motion, claws ripped through the tent fabric as if it were tissue paper. I caught a glimpse of glowing eyes, razor-sharp teeth, and matted fur before my world exploded into chaos and pain. The creature was upon me, its hot breath on my face as I raised my arms in a futile attempt to protect myself. "No!" I screamed, finding my voice at last. "Get off me!" I fought with every ounce of strength I possessed, kicking, punching, and clawing at my attacker. But it was like fighting a force of nature, wild, relentless, and overwhelmingly powerful. Pain seared through my body as the creature's claws and teeth found purchase. The metallic scent of blood, my blood, filled the air, mingling with the musty odor of the beast. In that moment, as I grappled with a monster I couldn't comprehend, I realized how foolish I'd been. I'd come to the forest seeking peace and solitude, but I'd found something else entirely. Something ancient, something terrifying, something that would change my life forever. As consciousness began to slip away, my last coherent thought was a desperate prayer. Someone, anyone, please help me. Then darkness claimed me, and I knew no more. Pain seared through my body as I dragged myself through the underbrush. Every movement was agony, my torn flesh screaming in protest. The taste of copper filled my mouth, and I could feel warm blood seeping from the deep gashes across my chest and arms. "Keep moving," I gasped to myself, my voice barely a whisper. "Don't stop. Can't stop." The forest around me was a blur of dark shapes and shadows. I had no idea how long I'd been crawling, how far I'd come from my destroyed campsite. The creature's howls had faded, but terror still gripped my heart. Was it toying with me? Waiting for me to tire before it struck again? I paused, listening intently. The night was eerily quiet, save for my own ragged breathing. Slowly I turned my head to look behind me. A trail of blood glistened in the moonlight, marking my desperate path through the woods. "No, no, no," I moaned, realizing I'd left a clear trail for the monster to follow. Panic gave me a surge of adrenaline, and I forced myself to move faster, ignoring the protests of my battered body. Branches whipped at my face as I pushed through a dense thicket. Thorns tore at my already shredded clothes, adding fresh cuts to my collection of wounds. But I pressed on, driven by pure survival instinct. After what felt like hours, I collapsed against the trunk of a massive oak tree. My lungs burned as I gulped down air, trying to quiet my breathing. I needed to rest just for a moment. "Think, Jake," I muttered to myself. "You need a plan. You need to find help." But as I sat there, the full weight of my situation crashed down upon me. I was alone, badly injured, lost in a vast forest with no supplies and no way to call for help. And somewhere out there, a creature beyond my worst nightmares was hunting me. Tears welled up in my eyes, a mix of pain, fear, and despair. "I'm going to die out here," I whispered, my voice breaking. A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness, and I froze. Had it found me? I held my breath, straining my ears for any further sound. Seconds ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. Then I heard it, a low, menacing growl that sent chills down my spine. "No, please," I whimpered, pressing myself against the tree as if I could meld into its bark and disappear. The growl grew louder, closer. I could hear heavy breathing and the rustle of leaves as something large moved through the underbrush. Slowly, I turned my head towards the sound. Two glowing eyes stared back at me from the shadows, filled with an inhuman hunger. In that moment, survival instinct took over. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the screaming pain in my limbs, and ran. I crashed through the forest blindly, branches and thorns tearing at me as I fled. Behind me, I could hear the creature in pursuit, its powerful limbs easily eating up the distance between us. Its hot breath seemed to tickle the back of my neck, spurring me to push harder, run faster. My foot caught on an exposed root and I went sprawling. I hit the ground hard, the impact driving what little air remained from my lungs. Dazed, I rolled onto my back, certain that this was the end. But as I looked up, my eyes widened in disbelief. There, through a gap in the trees, I saw a faint light in the distance. Hope surged through me, giving me one last burst of energy. I clawed my way to my feet and stumbled towards the light, praying it wasn't a hallucination. The trees began to thin, and suddenly I broke through the tree line. A road stretched before me, the distant light I'd seen coming from a lone street lamp. "Help!" I screamed, my voice hoarse and broken. "Somebody help me!" As if in answer to my prayers, I saw headlights approaching in the distance. I waved my arms frantically, stumbling onto the road. "Hey, stop! Please stop!" The car slowed as it approached, and I could have wept with relief. It pulled to a stop beside me, and an elderly couple peered out at me with shocked expressions. "Good Lord, son, what happened to you?" the old man asked, his eyes wide as he took in my battered, bloodied state. I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. Instead, I collapsed to my knees, sobs racking my body as the adrenaline faded and the full impact of what I'd been through hit me. "George, call an ambulance," the woman said urgently. She stepped out of the car and approached me cautiously. "It's all right, dear. You're safe now. We'll get you help." As she draped a blanket over my shoulders, I glanced back at the forest. The trees stood silent and dark, revealing no sign of the horror I'd just escaped. But I knew, deep in my bones, that something was still out there, watching and waiting. Thank you," I managed to stammer between sobs. "Thank you." As sirens wailed in the distance, announcing the approach of help, I silently vowed never to set foot in Blackwood Forest again. But even as the thought formed, a chill ran down my spine. Somehow, I knew that my encounter with the creature was far from over. This wasn't the end of my ordeal. It was only the beginning. The harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room seemed to burn into my retinas as I lay there, surrounded by the steady beep of monitors and the antiseptic smell that permeated everything. My body felt like one massive bruise, wrapped in bandages and stitches. The physical pain, however, paled in comparison to the mental anguish that gripped me. A gentle knock on the door preceded the entrance of Dr. Reeves, her kind face etched with concern. "How are you feeling today, Jake?" she asked, picking up my chart. I attempted a wry smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "Like I went 10 rounds with a wood chipper and lost," I replied, my voice still hoarse. Dr. Reeves nodded sympathetically. "Your injuries are severe, but you're making good progress. However, I'm more concerned about your mental state. Are you ready to talk about what happened?" Before I could respond, 2 men in police uniforms entered the room. The older of the two, a gruff-looking man with salt and pepper hair, introduced himself as Detective Bronson. "Mr. Cooper," he began, pulling out a notepad, "we need to go over your statement again. Can you tell us exactly what attacked you in the forest?" I closed my eyes, trying to suppress the vivid memories that threatened to overwhelm me. "I've told you already," I said, a hint of frustration in my voice. It was some kind of animal. Big. Powerful. Like nothing I've ever seen before. Detective Bronson exchanged a skeptical glance with his partner. "Mr. Cooper, we've searched the area where you were found. There's no evidence of any large predators in Blackwood Forest." "Well, there is now," I snapped, immediately regretting my outburst as pain shot through my chest. Dr. Reeves stepped in, her tone firm. "Gentlemen, I must insist you keep this brief. My patient needs rest." The younger officer spoke up, his voice gentler than his partner's. "We're just trying to understand, Mr. Cooper. Your injuries, they're inconsistent with any known animal attack in this region." I turned my head away, fighting back tears of frustration. "I know what I saw," I whispered. "I know what attacked me." After a few more questions, which I answered mechanically, the officers left. Dr. Reeves lingered, adjusting my IV. "Jake," she said softly, "I've arranged for a trauma counselor to visit you tomorrow. I think it might help to talk to someone." I nodded numbly, not really listening. As she left, I was once again alone with my thoughts and the lingering terror that seemed to have taken up permanent residence in my mind. That night, sleep eluded me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw glowing eyes and razor-sharp teeth. I could smell the creature's rancid breath, feel its claws tearing into my flesh. More than once I jolted awake, drenched in sweat and biting back screams. Morning came, bringing with it a new form of torment. As I listlessly picked at my breakfast, a news report on the small TV in my room caught my attention. Local authorities continue to investigate the alleged animal attack in Blackwood Forest, the reporter said. While the victim, whose name has not been released, claims to have been mauled by an unidentified creature, experts remain skeptical. The screen switched to an interview with a wildlife biologist. There are no known predators in Blackwood Forest capable of inflicting the kind of injuries described, he stated confidently. It's more likely that the victim experienced some kind of accident and, in his traumatized state, misinterpreted what happened. Anger and despair washed over me in equal measure. "I'm not crazy," I muttered, clenching my fists. It was real. It was real. Later that day, as promised, the trauma counselor visited. Dr. Sarah Chen was a petite woman with a calm demeanor that seemed to fill the room. "Jake," she began, her voice soothing, "I'd like you to tell me about that night. Not what attacked you, but how you felt. What were you thinking?" I took a deep breath, wincing at the pain in my ribs. "I felt helpless," I admitted. "Terrified. Like the whole world had suddenly turned upside down and nothing made sense anymore." Dr. Chen nodded encouragingly. "That's a normal response to trauma. What you went through was extraordinarily stressful. It's natural for your mind to try to make sense of it, even if that means creating explanations that might seem unlikely to others." I felt a surge of frustration. "You think I imagined it too, don't you? That I'm just some guy who had an accident and made up a monster to cope?" "I think," she replied carefully, "that you experienced something traumatic and your mind is still processing it. Our goal is to help you work through these feelings and memories in a healthy way." As she spoke, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the window. The man staring back at me was a stranger, pale, gaunt, with haunted eyes and angry red scars crisscrossing his face and neck. I quickly looked away, but the image seemed burned into my retinas. "I don't know if I can ever be the person I was before," I whispered, more to myself than to Dr. Chen. She leaned forward, her eyes filled with compassion. "Recovery is a journey, Jake. It won't be easy, and you won't be the same person you were. But with time and support, you can find a way to move forward." As she left, her words echoed in my mind. Move forward. But how could I move forward when every shadow made me flinch? When every unexpected sound sent my heart racing? How could I explain to anyone the bone-deep certainty that the creature was still out there, waiting? I turned my gaze to the window, staring at the distant line of trees that marked the edge of Blackwood Forest. Somewhere in those woods, a monster lurked, a monster that only I knew existed. And as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. My ordeal in Blackwood Forest had ended, but a new, potentially longer and more harrowing journey was just beginning. The journey to reclaim my life and my sanity in a world that refused to believe the truth of what I'd experienced. Weeks had passed since my discharge from the hospital, but the terror of that night in Blackwood Forest still clung to me like a second skin. I sat in my darkened apartment, curtains drawn tight against the outside world, jumping at every creak and groan of the old building. The shrill ring of my phone cut through the silence, making me nearly leap out of my skin. With trembling hands, I picked it up, recognizing the number of my best friend, Mike. "Hey, Jake." Mike's voice came through, a forced cheerfulness in his tone. "How are you doing, man? We haven't seen you in ages." I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm okay, Mike. Just been busy, you know." There was a pause, and I could almost feel Mike's concern through the phone. "Listen, a bunch of us are going out tonight. Why don't you join us? It'll be good for you to get out of the house." The thought of leaving my apartment, of being around people, sent a wave of anxiety crashing over me. "I don't know, Mike. I'm not really up for it." "Come on, Jake," Mike pleaded. "We're worried about you. Ever since, well, you know, you can't keep isolating yourself like this." I felt a flicker of irritation. How could I explain to him, to anyone, the constant fear I lived with? The certainty that the moment I let my guard down, the creature would find me again. "I appreciate the concern," I said, my tone sharper than I intended. "But I'm fine. I just need some time. Mike sighed. All right, man. But we're here for you, okay? Whenever you're ready. As I hung up, guilt mingled with my ever-present fear. I knew my friends were trying to help, but they couldn't understand. No one could. I turned back to my laptop, where dozens of tabs were open to various cryptozoology websites and local folklore forums. Since returning home, I'd become obsessed with finding an explanation for what had attacked me. Wendigos, skinwalkers, unknown species. I devoured every theory, no matter how outlandish. As I scrolled through yet another account of a mysterious creature sighting, a pop-up appeared on my screen. It was a message board notification. New post in Blackwood Forest Mysteries. The Beast of Blackwood, eyewitness account. My heart rate spiked. With shaking hands, I clicked the link, eyes scanning the post frantically. I saw it, the anonymous poster had written, in the deepest part of Blackwood. Massive, with glowing eyes and claws that could rend flesh from bone. It's real, and it's hungry. I felt a mix of vindication and terror. Someone else had seen it. I wasn't crazy. Without thinking, I created an account and replied, I believe you. I encountered it too. We need to talk. Almost immediately, a private message popped up. Meet me. Tomorrow, 3 p.m. Cafe on 5th and Main. Come alone. I stared at the message, my mind racing. Should I go? It could be a trap or a sick joke. But if there was even a chance that someone else knew the truth about the creature, I had to take it. The next day, I found myself sitting in the cafe, every nerve on edge. My eyes darted around the room, scrutinizing each patron. Who was I looking for? You must be Jake, a gravelly voice said. I turned to see an old man sliding into the seat across from me. His face was weathered, eyes sharp beneath bushy white eyebrows. How did you know? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He gave a sad smile. The scars, son, and the look in your eyes. You've seen it, haven't you? The Beast of Blackwood. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. What is it? The old man leaned in close. Something ancient. Something that should have stayed buried. But now it's awake and it's hungry. He went on to explain a shocking truth. The creature was part of an ancient curse that had plagued Blackwood Forest for centuries. Every few decades it would awaken, claiming victims before returning to its slumber. But why me? I asked, my mind reeling from the revelations. Why did it let me live? The old man's eyes bore into mine. Because, Jake, you're special. The creature marked you. You're bound to it now, and to the forest. I felt the blood drain from my face. What does that mean? It means, he said gravely, that sooner or later, you'll have to return to Blackwood. The forest will call to you and you won't be able to resist. I shook my head vehemently. No, I'm never going back there. The old man reached out, gripping my arm with surprising strength. Listen to me, Jake. You can run, you can hide, but you can't escape this. The only way out is through. As I left the cafe, my head spinning with this new information, I felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. The idea of returning to Blackwood terrified me, but there was also a part of me that yearned for answers, for resolution. Back in my apartment, I stood before the mirror, really looking at myself for the first time in weeks. The scars that crisscrossed my body seemed to pulse faintly, a constant reminder of that night. You're bound to it now. The old man's words echoed in my mind. As if in response, I felt a pull, a yearning for the deep, dark woods of Blackwood Forest. I tried to push it away, but it lingered, a constant presence at the edge of my consciousness. I turned away from the mirror, my jaw set with determination. I couldn't keep living like this, jumping at shadows and hiding from the world. If returning to Blackwood was the only way to end this nightmare, then that's what I had to do. With trembling hands, I began to pack a bag. Whatever awaited me in Blackwood Forest, whatever truth lay hidden in those dark woods, I would face it. Because the alternative, living in constant fear, always looking over my shoulder, was no life at all. As night fell, I looked out my window towards the distant tree line of Blackwood Forest. "I'm coming," I whispered, unsure if I was speaking to the forest, the creature, or some part of myself I didn't yet understand. And this time, I'll be ready. The cafe felt too exposed as I waited nervously for my mysterious informant to arrive. My eyes darted from the door to the windows, scanning for any sign of the old man who had turned my world upside down just days ago. My hands shook slightly as I wrapped them around my coffee mug, seeking comfort in its warmth. The bell above the door chimed, and I looked up to see the old man enter. His weathered face bore a grim expression as he made his way to my table, his cane tapping a steady rhythm on the linoleum floor. "You came," he said, lowering himself into the chair across from me. "I wasn't sure you would." I leaned forward, my voice low and urgent. "I need to know more. About the curse, about the creature, about why I'm connected to all of this." The old man sighed heavily, his eyes full of sympathy and hidden knowledge. "It's a long and dark tale, Jake. Are you sure you're ready to hear it?" I nodded firmly. "I have to know. I can't live like this anymore, always looking over my shoulder, jumping at every shadow." He reached into his coat and pulled out an ancient-looking leather-bound book. As he opened it, I caught a whiff of musty pages and something else, something wild and earthy. "Blackwood Forest has been home to dark forces for centuries," he began, his voice taking on a rhythmic cadence like a storyteller of old. "The native people who first lived here knew of its power and treated the land with respect and fear. But when settlers came, they ignored the warnings." As he spoke, he turned the pages of the book, revealing intricate drawings of rituals, strange symbols, and terrifying creatures that made my scars ache with remembered pain. They desecrated sacred grounds, hunted animals to near extinction, and upset the delicate balance of the forest, the old man continued. "And so the guardians of the forest laid a curse upon the land and all who would seek to tame it." I interrupted, my brow furrowed in confusion. "Guardians? You mean there's more than one creature?" The old man shook his head. "Not exactly. The guardian spirit of the forest manifests as the creature you encountered. It's a protector turned vengeful, a force of nature twisted by centuries of anger and pain." He turned another page, revealing a drawing of a beast that matched my nightmares perfectly. I felt the blood drain from my face as I stared at the illustration. "But why me?" I asked, tearing my eyes away from the image. "Why did it choose to mark me?" The old man's eyes met mine, filled with a mix of pity and something else. Expectation, perhaps? "The curse doesn't just choose anyone, Jake. It seeks out those with a connection to the forest, those with the potential to understand and perhaps to end the cycle." I sat back, feeling as if the wind had been knocked out of me. "End the cycle? What does that mean?" "It means," he said solemnly, "that you're now bound to the forest. The mark you bear," he gestured to my scars, "is both a curse and a potential key. You have the power to confront the guardian, to potentially break the curse, or to become its new vessel." The implications of his words hit me like a physical blow. I felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the weight of this revelation. "I never asked for this," I whispered, more to myself than to the old man. He reached across the table, his gnarled hand gripping mine with surprising strength. "Few ever do, my boy. But destiny has a way of finding us whether we're ready or not." As I struggled to process this information, a new thought occurred to me. "Wait, how do you know all this? Who are you, really?" A sad smile crossed the old man's face. "I was once like you, Jake. Marked by the guardian, bound to the forest, I thought I could run from it, ignore the call. But the forest always claims what's hers in the end." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing a series of scars eerily similar to my own. "I've spent decades studying the curse, trying to find a way to end it. But I'm too old now, too weak to face the guardian again. That task falls to you." I shook my head, fear and disbelief warring within me. I can't. I'm not strong enough. I'm not a hero. The old man's eyes softened. Neither was I when I was chosen. But the forest sees something in you, Jake. Something that might just be able to heal the wounds of centuries and bring balance back to Blackwood. As he spoke, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. The scars on my body seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy, and unbidden images flashed through my mind. Ancient trees, moonlit clearings, and eyes glowing in the darkness. I gasped, gripping the edge of the table. What's happening to me? The forest is calling to you, the old man said, his voice urgent. You can't ignore it forever, Jake. Sooner or later, you'll have to answer. As the sensation faded, I looked at the old man with new resolve. What do I need to do? He pushed the book across the table to me. Study this. Learn the history, the rituals. Prepare yourself for what's to come. And when you're ready, return to Blackwood. Face the Guardian. End the curse, one way or another. As I left the cafe, the ancient book tucked safely in my bag, I felt a mix of terror and determination. The path ahead was shrouded in darkness and danger, but for the first time since that fateful night, I felt a glimmer of hope. I looked towards the distant line of trees that marked the edge of Blackwood Forest. I'm coming, I whispered, unsure if I was speaking to the forest, the Guardian, or some part of myself I didn't yet understand. And this time, I'll be ready. The wind seemed to whisper in response, carrying the scent of pine and promises of secrets yet to be unveiled. My journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. Sleepless nights had become my new normal. I sat at my desk, the ancient book the old man had given me open before me, its pages illuminated by the pale glow of my laptop screen. My eyes burned from exhaustion, but I couldn't stop reading, couldn't stop searching for answers. The wind howled outside, branches scraping against my window like skeletal fingers. I shuddered, pulling my blanket tighter around my shoulders. Every sound, every shadow seemed to hide potential threats now. Get a grip, Jake, I muttered to myself, rubbing my eyes. You're safe here. But even as I said the words, I knew they weren't true. I hadn't felt safe since that night in Blackwood Forest. And now, with what I was learning from this book, I was beginning to realize that I might never feel safe again. I turned another page, my eyes widening as I took in the intricate diagrams and symbols scrawled across the yellowed paper. Strange words in a language I didn't recognize danced before my eyes, seeming to shift and change as I stared at them. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through my whiskers. I gasped, clutching at my chest as the marks began to glow with a faint, pulsing light. What the hell? I whispered, staring in disbelief at my glowing skin. As if in response, the symbols on the page before me seemed to come alive, swirling and rearranging themselves. To my astonishment, I found I could read them now. The Guardian sleeps but never dies. In blood and bone the forest's power lies. A sharp knock at my door made me jump, slamming the book shut. Heart pounding, I approached the door cautiously. Who is it? I called out, my voice shaking slightly. Jake, it's Sarah. Can I come in? I hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Sarah, my neighbor and one of the few friends who still checked up on me, stood in the hallway, concern etched on her face. Hey, she said softly, taking in my disheveled appearance. I heard noises. Are you okay? I forced a smile, trying to look more put together than I felt. Yeah, just working late. Sorry if I disturbed you. Sarah's eyes flicked past me into the apartment, taking in the stacks of books and papers, the empty coffee cups littering every surface. Jake, I'm worried about you. We all are. You barely leave your apartment anymore, you don't return calls. I felt a pang of guilt. I know, I'm sorry, I've just been dealing with some things. She reached out, placing a hand on my arm. You know you can talk to me, right? About anything. For a moment I was tempted to tell her everything. About the creature, the curse, the impossible task that lay before me. but I knew how it would sound. I'd be back in the psych ward before I could finish the story. I appreciate that, Sarah. Really. I just need some time to sort things out. She nodded, though I could see the doubt in her eyes. Okay. But promise me you'll get some rest? You look like you haven't slept in days. As I closed the door behind her, I felt a wave of loneliness wash over me. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes and taking deep breaths. When I opened them again, I found myself staring at my reflection in the hallway mirror. The man looking back at me was a stranger, pale, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes and a wild, haunted look. But it was the scars that drew my attention. They were glowing again, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. And as I watched, transfixed, I saw something move beneath my skin. Shadows shifting and swirling, as if something was trying to claw its way out from inside me. Panicked, I stumbled back to my desk, flipping open the book to where I'd left off. The symbols were still moving, forming new words before my eyes. The forest calls. The chosen must heed. In darkness deep, the truth you'll read. As if on cue, images began to flash through my mind. Moonlit clearings, ancient trees with faces carved into their bark, eyes glowing in the shadows. I could smell pine needles and damp earth, could feel the cool forest air on my skin. No, I whispered, shaking my head as if I could dislodge the visions. I'm not ready. I can't go back there. But even as I resisted, I could feel the pull growing stronger. The forest was calling to me, and I knew, deep in my bones, that I couldn't ignore it much longer. With trembling hands, I reached for my phone and dialed a number I'd sworn I'd never use. Hello? The old man's gravelly voice answered. It's Jake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It's happening. The visions, the symbols. I can understand them now. I heard him intake a sharp breath. Then it's time, Jake. The forest is calling you home. But I don't know what to do, I admitted, fear and desperation creeping into my voice. I'm not prepared. I'm not strong enough. You are stronger than you know, he replied, his voice filled with a certainty I wished I could feel. The forest chose you for a reason. Trust in that. Trust in yourself. As we talked, I found myself packing a bag, clothes, flashlight, the ancient book. It was as if my body was moving of its own accord, preparing for a journey my mind was still resisting. Remember, the old man said as we were about to hang up, the Guardian is powerful, but it's also a part of you now. Use that connection. It may be the key to ending the curse. As I ended the call, I stood in the middle of my apartment, bag in hand, poised on the precipice of a journey I never asked for but could no longer avoid. I took one last look around, at the life I was leaving behind, unsure if I'd ever return. Then, with a deep breath, I stepped out into the night, the pull of Blackwood Forest guiding my steps. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the scent of pine and promises of secrets yet to be unveiled. My journey back to the heart of the curse was about to begin, and I had no idea what awaited me in the shadows of Blackwood Forest. The forest loomed before me, dark and foreboding, as I stood at its edge. My heart raced, memories of that fateful night flooding back. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to run as far from this place as I could. But the pull was undeniable now, a constant tugging sensation that seemed to emanate from my very bones. You can do this, Jake, I muttered to myself, adjusting the straps of my backpack. You have to do this. With a deep breath, I took my first tentative steps into Blackwood Forest. The canopy above was thick, filtering out most of the moonlight and plunging me into near darkness. I clicked on my flashlight, its beam cutting through the gloom and casting long, eerie shadows. Every snapping twig and rustling leaf set my nerves on edge. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something was following me, always just out of sight. Hello? I called out, immediately regretting it as my voice echoed through the trees. Is anyone there? Only the whisper of the wind answered me, carrying with it the musty scent of decaying leaves and something else, something wild and ancient that I couldn't quite place. As I pressed deeper into the forest, I began to notice changes. The trees seemed to grow older, their trunks wider and more gnarled. Moss hung in thick curtains, and strange fungi glowed with an otherworldly light. Suddenly, my foot caught on something, sending me sprawling to the forest floor. As I pushed myself up, my hand brushed against something smooth and cold. I directed my flashlight beam downward and gasped. It was a stone marker, ancient and weathered, covered in familiar symbols, the same ones from the book. As I traced my fingers over the carvings, my scars began to tingle and glow faintly. The symbols seemed to shift and move under my touch, rearranging themselves into words I could understand. The chosen returns, the cycle renewed. In blood and bone, the truth imbued. A chill ran down my spine as I read the words aloud. As if in response, a ghostly whisper seemed to echo through the trees. Jake, come to us." I spun around, my flashlight beam dancing wildly across the trees. "Who's there?" I demanded, trying to keep the fear out of my voice. The whisper came again, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Follow. Against my better judgment, I found myself moving in the direction of the voice. The forest grew denser, the air heavier. My flashlight beam began to flicker and dim. No, I muttered, shaking the flashlight desperately. But it was no use. With a final sputter, it went dark, leaving me in total blackness. Panic began to set in as I stumbled forward blindly, hands outstretched. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "This way, come. The truth awaits." Suddenly, my hands met empty air. I took another step and found myself falling, tumbling down a steep incline. I rolled and bounced, unable to stop my descent until I finally came to a halt at the bottom. Groaning, I pushed myself up, checking for injuries. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I realized I was in some kind of clearing. And there, in the center, was the entrance to a cave. The cave mouth yawned before me, a perfect oval of absolute blackness. The whispers seemed to emanate from within, calling me forward. "I can't," I said aloud, my voice shaking. "I can't go in there." But even as I spoke, I felt the pull growing stronger. My scars burned and pulsed, and I could feel something stirring inside me, something wild and powerful that yearned to be released. With trembling hands, I reached into my backpack and pulled out the ancient book. As I opened it, the pages began to glow softly, providing just enough light to see. "Okay," I whispered, steeling myself. "Okay. I can do this. I have to do this." Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the cave. The air inside was cool and damp, heavy with the weight of centuries. As I moved deeper, the cave walls seemed to close in around me, covered in primitive paintings depicting terrifying beasts and cowering humans. I ran my fingers along the rough stone, feeling a connection to those who had come before me, who had faced the same terrors I now confronted. Suddenly, my hand brushed against something that felt different, smoother, more intentional. I directed the book's glow towards it and saw an inscription carved into the rock face. As I leaned in to read it, the words seemed to shift and change, just as they had in the book. But now, I could understand them perfectly. "In darkness deep, the truth you'll find. The beast without, the beast within. To break the curse and end the strife, the chosen must give more than life." A chill ran down my spine as I deciphered the ancient prophecy. What did it mean? What would I have to sacrifice to end this curse? Before I could ponder further, a low growl echoed through the cave. I spun around, heart pounding, to see two glowing eyes staring at me from the darkness. The beast had found me. As I stood there, frozen in terror and anticipation, I realized that this was the moment everything had been leading to. All my fears, all my preparation, all the mysteries of Blackwood Forest, it all came down to this confrontation. "I'm here," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm ready to face you." The creature stepped forward, its massive form slowly revealed in the soft glow of the book. But as it came into full view, I gasped in shock, for staring back at me was not just a beast, but a mirror image of myself, scarred, wild-eyed, caught between human and monster. In that moment, I understood the true nature of the curse, and the choice that lay before me. The real battle wasn't with some external monster, but with the darkness within myself. As the cave trembled around us, marking the beginning of our confrontation, I knew that whatever the outcome, I would emerge from this cave a changed man, if I emerged at all. The cave trembled around us, loose pebbles cascading from the ceiling as I stood face to face with my doppelganger. It was me, yet not me, a twisted reflection of all my fears and doubts made flesh. "What are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over the low rumble echoing through the cavern. The creature, my dark twin, tilted its head, a grotesque smile spreading across its face. When it spoke, its voice was a raspy imitation of my own. "I am you, Jake. The part of you that you've tried so hard to deny. The beast within." I shook my head, backing away. "No. You're the guardian. The curse. You're not me." It laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. "Oh, but I am. I am the darkness that's always been inside you, given form by the forest's magic. And now it's time for us to become one." The creature lunged forward, clawed hands reaching for me. I stumbled backward, narrowly avoiding its grasp. My back hit the cave wall, and I could feel the rough stone digging into my skin. "Stay back," I shouted, holding the glowing book in front of me like a shield. To my surprise, the creature recoiled, hissing as if the light pained it. I looked down at the book, then back at the beast, an idea forming in my mind. "The truth," I muttered, remembering the inscription. "In darkness deep, the truth you'll find." I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Then, I began to read aloud from the book, my voice growing stronger with each word. "The guardian and the chosen are two halves of a whole. To end the curse, they must be reunited." The creature snarled, but I could see uncertainty in its eyes. My eyes. I pressed on, the words flowing from me as if I'd always known them. "The forest's power flows through both, a river divided. Only by accepting the darkness within can the chosen bring light to the shadows." As I spoke, my scars began to glow brighter, pulsing in time with my heartbeat. The beast let out a howl of pain and fury, clawing at its own chest where identical marks blazed. "Stop!" it roared. "You don't know what you're doing." But I did know. For the first time since this nightmare began, I understood. "I do know," I said, my voice calm and resolute. "I know that you're a part of me, a part I've been afraid of, a part I've tried to run from, but I'm not running anymore." I took a step forward, then another. The creature backed away, its form seeming to waver and distort. "What are you doing?" it growled, but I could hear the fear in its voice. "I'm accepting you," I said. "All of you. The darkness and the light. The human and the beast." I reached out, my hand hovering just inches from the creature's face. It stared at me, a mix of terror and longing in its eyes. "We don't have to be enemies," I said softly. "We can be whole again." For a moment, everything was still. Then, slowly, hesitantly, the creature leaned into my touch. As soon as our skin made contact, a jolt of energy surged through me. Images flashed before my eyes, centuries of guardians, each bearing the mark, each struggling with the duality of their nature. I saw the forest as it once was, pristine and full of magic. I saw the destruction wrought by those who sought to tame it, and the curse born of pain and rage. And I saw myself not as I was, but as I could be, human and guardian, protector of the forest and its secrets. The cave filled with blinding light, and I felt myself falling, merging, becoming something new. When the light faded, I stood alone in the cavern, but I was forever changed. I could feel the forest's power coursing through me, wild and ancient, but it no longer felt like a foreign presence. It was a part of me now, as natural as breathing. I looked down at my hands, watching as they shifted and changed, claws extending and then retracting at my will. I could feel the heightened senses, the connection to every living thing in Blackwood Forest. "I understand now," I said aloud, my voice echoing in the empty cave. This was never about defeating the Guardian. It was about becoming it. As if in response, the cave began to shake more violently. Rocks tumbled from the ceiling, and I knew I had to get out. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something on the wall, a new inscription, glowing with an inner light. "The cycle is broken. The Guardian reborn. In unity found, the forest transformed." I smiled, running my fingers over the words. "Thank you," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was thanking, the old man, the forest, or some part of myself I was only now beginning to understand. With one last look at the cave that had changed everything, I made my way back to the surface. As I emerged into the forest, I could feel the difference immediately. The air was clearer, the colors more vibrant, and the whispers that had haunted me for so long were now a chorus of welcome. I took a deep breath, feeling truly at peace for the first time in months. The path ahead was still uncertain, full of new challenges and responsibilities. But I was ready to face them, not as Jake the victim or the Guardian the monster, but as something new, a protector, a bridge between two worlds. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I set off deeper into the forest, ready to begin my new life as the Guardian of Blackwood. The curse was broken, but my journey was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The early morning sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. I moved through the trees with a grace and surety I'd never possessed before, my newly heightened senses alive to every sight, sound, and smell of the awakening forest. As I walked, I could feel the pulse of life all around me, the steady heartbeats of animals, the slow, deep rhythms of ancient trees, even the tiny vibrations of insects in the soil. It was overwhelming and exhilarating all at once. "This is incredible," I whispered, running my hand along the rough bark of an oak. To my amazement, I could feel it respond, a gentle thrum of recognition passing between us. Suddenly, a voice called out, startling me from my reverie. "Jake? Jake, is that you?" I turned to see Sarah emerging from the trees, her face a mix of relief and concern. I realized with a start that I had no idea how long I'd been in the forest. It could have been hours or days. "Sarah, what are you doing here?" I asked, suddenly very aware of how I must look, wild-eyed and disheveled, my clothes torn and dirty. She approached cautiously, her eyes scanning me for injuries. "You've been missing for 3 days, Jake. Everyone's been worried sick. We've had search parties combing the forest." 3 days. It had felt like mere hours since I'd entered the cave. I struggled to find the words to explain what had happened, what I had become. "I'm okay, Sarah," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "I know this is going to sound crazy, but something amazing happened to me in there." As I spoke, I felt a subtle shift within me. My senses sharpened even further, and I could smell the fear and confusion rolling off Sarah in waves. "Jake, you're scaring me," she said, taking a step back. "What's going on? Your eyes, they're different." I realized my eyes must have changed, reflecting the beast that was now a part of me. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. "I'm still me, Sarah," I said softly, "but I'm also something more now. I'm the guardian of this forest." Her brow furrowed in confusion. "Guardian? Jake, you're not making any sense. We need to get you to a hospital." She reached for my arm, but I gently pulled away. "No, Sarah, I don't need a hospital. I need you to listen, to understand." And so, there in the heart of Blackwood Forest, I told her everything about the curse, the creature, the cave, and the transformation. As I spoke, I could see the disbelief in her eyes slowly give way to a wary acceptance. This is a lot to take in, she said when I finished, running a hand through her hair. If I hadn't seen your eyes change, hadn't felt how different you are, I'm not sure I'd believe it. I nodded, understanding her skepticism. I know it sounds impossible, but it's real, Sarah. And now I have a responsibility to this forest and everything in it. As if to emphasize my point, a deer emerged from the undergrowth, approaching us without fear. It nuzzled against my hand and I stroked its neck, feeling the life pulsing beneath its fur. Sarah watched in amazement. Okay, she said slowly. Let's say I believe you. What happens now? It was a question I'd been pondering myself. Now I need to heal this forest. For too long it's been wounded, lashing out in pain. But with the curse broken, there's a chance for balance. I looked around at the trees, feeling their ancient wisdom. But I can't do it alone. The forest needs to reconnect with people, to forge a new relationship based on respect and understanding. An idea began to form in my mind. Sarah, you work for the local paper, right? She nodded, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. Let me guess. You want me to write a story about the magical guardian of Blackwood Forest? I laughed, the sound echoing through the trees. Not exactly. But what if we could organize nature walks, educational programs about the forest's ecosystem? Get people to see this place as something to cherish and protect, not fear? Sarah's eyes lit up. That could work. It would take time, and a lot of effort, but it could really make a difference. As we talked, I could feel the forest responding to our plans, a sense of hope and renewal spreading through the trees. But suddenly, a chill ran down my spine. My newfound senses picked up on something wrong. Jake, what is it? Sarah asked, noticing my sudden tension. I held up a hand, listening intently. In the distance, I could hear the roar of engines, the harsh sound of metal against wood. Logging trucks, I growled, feeling a surge of protective anger. On the north side of the forest, they're cutting into a grove of old-growth trees. Sarah's eyes widened. But that area is protected. They can't be logging there legally. I nodded grimly. Then it looks like the Guardian of Blackwood has his first real test. I turned to Sarah, my eyes glowing with an inner fire. I need you to call the authorities, report the illegal logging. Can you do that? She nodded, already pulling out her phone. Of course. But what are you going to do? I smiled, feeling the power of the forest flowing through me. I'm going to remind them why people used to fear the creatures of Blackwood. With that, I took off running, faster than any human could move. As I raced through the trees, I could feel my body changing, becoming something more than human. Claws extended from my fingers, my senses sharpened even further, and I felt the ancient power of the Guardian rising within me. The loggers would soon learn that Blackwood Forest was no longer unprotected. The Guardian had returned, and this time, he was here to stay. As I ran, the forest seemed to come alive around me, branches reaching out to clear my path, roots flattening to ease my way. I was no longer just running through the forest, I was running with it, a part of something vast and ancient and alive. The first battle in my new role as Guardian was about to begin, and I was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For the first time in my life, I knew exactly who I was and what I was meant to do. I was the Guardian of Blackwood Forest, and I would protect this land with every fiber of my being. The roar of chainsaws grew louder as I approached the northern edge of Blackwood Forest. The acrid smell of exhaust fumes and freshly cut wood assaulted my heightened senses, fueling the anger building within me. As I burst through the tree line, I saw the source of the destruction, a team of loggers, their heavy machinery tearing into the ancient grove. I paused at the forest's edge, hidden in the shadows, and took in the scene. 5 men operated various pieces of equipment, while 2 more guided the felling of a massive oak that had likely stood for centuries. The sight of it made my blood boil. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out into the clearing. Stop! I shouted, my voice carrying an otherworldly resonance that made the loggers freeze in their tracks. The foreman, a burly man with a thick beard, was the first to recover. He stormed towards me, his face red with anger. "Who the hell are you? This is a restricted area." I stood my ground, feeling the power of the forest surge through me. "I am the guardian of Blackwood Forest," I said, my eyes glowing with an inner fire. "And you are trespassing on protected land." The foreman scoffed, though I could smell the fear beginning to roll off him. "Guardian? Look, buddy, I don't know what game you're playing, but we have permits for this operation. Now get out of here before I call the cops." "Your permits are as fake as your concern for this forest," I growled, my form beginning to shift. Claws extended from my fingers, my muscles bulged, and I could feel my features becoming more bestial. "I'm giving you one chance to leave. After that, I can't promise your safety." The loggers backed away, their eyes wide with terror. One of them, a younger man, dropped his chainsaw and ran for the trucks. "Screw this, I'm out," he yelled over his shoulder. The foreman, however, stood his ground. "You don't scare me, freak," he snarled, reaching for something in his jacket. "I've dealt with eco-terrorists before." Before he could pull out whatever weapon he was reaching for, I moved. In a blur of speed that surprised even me, I closed the distance between us, gripping his wrist with inhuman strength. "I am no eco-terrorist," I said, my voice a low growl. "I am something far older and far more dangerous." With my free hand, I reached out to the nearest tree. To the astonishment of the watching loggers, the tree's branches began to move, reaching down towards us like grasping fingers. "This forest is alive," I continued, letting my form shift further, reveling in the power flowing through me. "It feels pain. It remembers, and it has chosen me as its protector." The foreman's bravado crumbled. He wrenched his hand free and stumbled backwards, terror plain on his face. What are you?" he stammered. I smiled, knowing it must look terrifying on my transformed face. "I am the thing your ancestors feared when they first came to these woods. I am the shadow in the trees, the whisper on the wind. I am the guardian of Blackwood, and you are not welcome here." As if to emphasize my point, the ground began to tremble. Roots erupted from the earth, wrapping around the logging equipment. The loggers cried out in panic, scrambling to get away from the animated forest. "Leave now," I commanded, my voice echoing with power. "Spread the word. Blackwood Forest is protected. Any who seek to harm it will answer to me." They didn't need to be told twice. The loggers ran for their trucks, abandoning their equipment to the grasping roots and branches. Within minutes, the sound of engines faded into the distance, leaving behind an eerie silence. As the immediate threat passed, I felt my form begin to shift back. The surge of power receded, leaving me feeling drained but exhilarated. I turned to the damaged section of the forest, feeling a deep sadness for the trees that had been felled. "I'm sorry," I murmured, placing a hand on the stump of the great oak. "I wasn't here in time to save you." To my amazement, I felt a response, not in words, but in feelings and images. The oak's life flashed before me, centuries of growth, of weathering storms and nurturing countless creatures, and with it came a sense of acceptance of the natural cycle of life and death. "Thank you," I whispered, understanding the gift of wisdom the ancient tree had shared with me. The sound of approaching sirens broke through my reverie. Sarah had come through. The authorities were on their way. I knew I couldn't be seen like this, not yet. There would be a time to reveal the truth to the wider world. But for now, the Guardian needed to remain a mystery. As I retreated into the shadows of the forest, I heard familiar footsteps approaching. Sarah burst into the clearing, her eyes widening as she took in the scene. The abandoned logging equipment, the uprooted ground, the trees that were still slowly settling back into place. "Jake?" she called out, her voice a mix of awe and uncertainty. "Are you here?" I wanted to reveal myself, to share this moment with her, but I knew I couldn't. Instead, I let out a low musical whistle, a sound no human throat could produce. Sarah spun toward the sound, a smile spreading across her face as she spotted me in the shadows. She nodded in understanding, then turned to greet the arriving police cars. As I watched her begin to explain the situation to the bewildered officers, I felt a swell of gratitude. Sarah was my link to the human world, a bridge between my old life and my new purpose. With her help, and the power granted to me by the forest, I had a chance to make a real difference. The battle for Blackwood Forest was far from over. I knew there would be more threats, more challenges to face, but for the first time since this all began, I felt truly ready to face them. I melted back into the forest, becoming one with the shadows and the trees. The guardian of Blackwood was no longer a thing of fear and curse, but a protector, a force of balance and nature. And I was only just beginning to understand the full extent of my new role. As I moved deeper into the heart of my domain, I could feel the forest's approval humming through every leaf and branch. The adventure that had begun with terror and confusion had transformed into something beautiful and purposeful. Whatever came next, I was ready. Blackwood Forest had its guardian, and I had finally found my true home. Weeks had passed since the confrontation with the loggers, and life in and around Blackwood Forest had taken on a new rhythm. I split my time between patrolling the woods in my guardian form and working with Sarah to implement our plans for forest conservation and education. On this particular morning, I stood at the edge of a clearing, watching as Sarah led a group of wide-eyed children on a nature walk. Her voice carried clearly through the trees. "Now, who can tell me why this mushroom is so important to the forest?" she asked, pointing to a cluster of fungi at the base of an old oak. A little girl with pigtails raised her hand eagerly. "Ooh, I know. It helps break down dead stuff and makes food for the trees." Sarah beamed. "That's exactly right, Emma. Everything in the forest has a job to do, even the tiniest mushroom." I couldn't help but smile, feeling a surge of pride for how quickly Sarah had taken to her role as an educator. As the group moved on, I stepped out of the shadows, shifting back to my fully human form. Sarah noticed me and waved the children on. "Keep following the trail, kids. I'll be right there." She jogged over to me, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Jake, I didn't expect to see you this morning. How goes the guardian business?" I chuckled, still marveling at how easily she had accepted my dual nature. "Quiet, thankfully. No more illegal logging attempts since word got out about the Blackwood Beast." I made air quotes around the nickname the local paper had given my guardian form. Sarah rolled her eyes. "I still can't believe they went with that." I pushed for Forest Protector, but apparently that wasn't sensational enough. "Well, as long as it keeps people from trying to exploit the forest, I can live with being called a beast," I said with a shrug. "How are the tours going?" Her face lit up. "Amazing. We're booked solid for the next month. People are fascinated by the forest now that it's not seen as this scary, cursed place anymore." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "But that's not why you're here, is it? What's going on, Jake?" I sighed, impressed once again by her perceptiveness. "You're right. We've got a situation brewing. The city council is voting next week on a proposal to build a new highway. If it passes, they'll cut right through the eastern edge of Blackwood." Sarah's eyes widened. "But that would be devastating. We've got to stop it." I nodded grimly. "Agreed. But we need to be smart about this. We can't solve every problem with the Blackwood Beast making an appearance. We need to win this one the human way." "Protests? Petitions?" Sarah suggested, her journalist mind already spinning into action. "That's a start," I agreed. "But I think we need something bigger. Something that will make people see the true value of the forest." As we brainstormed, a commotion from the group of children caught our attention. We rushed over to find them gathered around a small clearing, pointing and whispering excitedly. "Miss Sarah! Mr. Jake! Look!" Emma called out, gesturing towards the center of the clearing. There, bathed in a shaft of sunlight, stood a magnificent white stag. Its coat gleamed like fresh snow, and its antlers seemed to glow with an inner light. I felt my breath catch in my throat. In all my time as guardian, I had never seen anything like it. The stag regarded us calmly, its dark eyes seeming to hold ancient wisdom. Then, to my amazement, it spoke directly into my mind. Guardian, its voice resonated in my thoughts, rich and deep. The forest has flourished under your protection, but a new threat approaches, one that cannot be fought with claw or fang. I nodded, understanding. The highway, I thought back. Yes, the stag confirmed. To face this challenge, you must unite the people with the forest. Show them the magic that lives here, the wonders that will be lost if they continue on their path. An idea began to form in my mind. I turned to Sarah, who was watching me with a mixture of awe and curiosity. I think I know what we need to do, I said softly. As if satisfied, the white stag bowed its majestic head and then bounded away, disappearing into the trees as suddenly as it had appeared. The children erupted into excited chatter, but Sarah kept her eyes on me. "What just happened?" she asked. "You looked like you were having a conversation with it." I nodded, still processing the encounter. I was, and it gave me an idea. I turned to address the group. "Kids, how would you like to help save the forest?" Their enthusiastic cheers brought a smile to my face. I knelt down to their level, feeling the weight of the Guardian's responsibility more than ever. "The forest is magical," I told them, "but it needs our help. People have forgotten how special this place is, so we're going to remind them." Over the next hour, as we walked back to the forest's edge, I outlined my plan to Sarah and the children. We would organize a nighttime festival in the heart of Blackwood, showcasing its beauty and magic. Glowing fungi, bioluminescent insects, the melodious songs of nocturnal birds, all the wonders that most people never got to see. "And if we time it right," I added, my voice low so only Sarah could hear, "I might be able to arrange a few extra magical touches." Sarah's eyes sparkled with excitement. "A real magical forest night? Jake, that's brilliant. But do you think it'll be enough to stop the highway?" I looked out over the forest, feeling its ancient power thrumming through me. "It has to be," I said softly, "because if we can't make them see the value of this place, I'm not sure what else we can do." As we emerged from the tree line, I could see the parents waiting to pick up their children. The kids ran to them, bubbling over with excitement about the white stag and the magical festival to come. Sarah squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens, we're in this together," she said. Guardian and journalist, protecting Blackwood one story at a time. I squeezed back, grateful for her unwavering support. As I watched the families drive away, their children's faces pressed against car windows for one last glimpse of the forest, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle for Blackwood's future was far from over. But with the forest's magic, the community's support, and the wisdom of ancient spirits to guide us, I believed we had a fighting chance. The night of the festival would determine not just the fate of the forest, but the path of my own journey as its guardian. As twilight settled over Blackwood, I retreated into its depths, ready to prepare for our greatest challenge yet. The forest had chosen me as its protector, and I was determined not to let it down. The evening of the festival arrived, bringing with it a palpable sense of anticipation. As twilight deepened into dusk, I stood at the entrance to Blackwood Forest, watching as people began to gather. Families with excited children, couples hand in hand, and curious individuals of all ages formed a growing crowd. Sarah approached, clipboard in hand, and a look of controlled chaos on her face. "Jake, we've got a problem. The sound system for the main stage isn't working properly." I placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, I've got it covered. Just make sure everyone stays on the marked paths once we start." She nodded, then lowered her voice. "Are you sure about this, using your abilities so openly?" I took a deep breath, feeling the power of the forest humming through me. "It's time, Sarah. If we want to save Blackwood, people need to see its true magic." As Sarah hurried off to manage the last-minute details, I stepped forward to address the crowd. Welcome, everyone, to the first Blackwood Forest Night Festival. My voice carried easily over the murmur of the crowd, touched by a hint of otherworldly resonance. Tonight, you'll witness wonders you've never imagined. But remember, stay on the marked paths and respect the forest. It's more alive than you know. With that cryptic warning, I led the group into the woods. As we walked, I felt the forest responding to my presence, to my will. Bioluminescent fungi began to glow brighter, lighting our way with an ethereal blue-green radiance. Fireflies emerged in swirling patterns, dancing around the awestruck visitors. "Oh, Arthur, look!" I heard a woman gasp to her husband. "I've never seen so many fireflies." "And those mushrooms," Arthur replied, his voice filled with wonder. "I didn't know they could glow like that." I smiled to myself, knowing this was only the beginning. As we reached the first clearing, I nodded to Sarah, who stepped forward to play her part. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "prepare to witness the dance of the forest spirits." On cue, I reached out with my guardian senses, calling to the ancient energies of Blackwood. The air shimmered, and translucent forms began to take shape. Ephemeral dancers that twirled and spun in rhythm with the forest's heartbeat. Gasps of amazement rippled through the crowd. A little boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mommy, are those real fairies?" Before his mother could answer, I knelt beside him. "They're the spirits of Blackwood," I said softly. "They don't often show themselves to humans, but tonight is special." As we moved deeper into the forest, each new wonder seemed to top the last. A grove of trees burst into song, their leaves rustling in complex harmonies. A gentle rain of glowing pollen drifted down in another clearing, coating everything in shimmering gold dust. Near the heart of the forest, we paused before the massive oak, where I had first encountered the white stag. "This tree has stood for over 500 years," I told the group. "It has seen the passage of time, the changing of the land. If we listen closely, we might hear its stories." I placed my hand on the ancient bark, channeling my connection to the forest. To the amazement of the onlookers, the tree's rings began to glow, pulsing like a heartbeat. Ghostly images formed in the air around us. Native Americans tending the land, European settlers arriving, the forest changing and growing through the centuries. It's like watching history come alive," I heard someone murmur. As the final image faded, a scene of our own group standing in awe before the tree, I turned to address the crowd once more. "What you've seen tonight is just a fraction of the magic that lives in Blackwood Forest. This place is alive, filled with wonders we're only beginning to understand. And now, it needs your help." Sarah stepped forward, her eyes shining with emotion. "The City Council is voting next week on a proposal to build a highway through the eastern part of Blackwood. If it passes, much of what you've seen tonight will be destroyed." A murmur of concern rippled through the group. I could sense their conflicting emotions, wonder at what they'd witnessed, fear of the unknown, and a growing desire to protect this magical place. An older man raised his hand. "But what can we do? We're just regular folks." I smiled, feeling the forest's approval humming through me. "You can speak up, attend the council meeting, sign petitions, share what you've seen here tonight. The magic of Blackwood has always been here. It just needed someone to reveal it. Now you can be its voice." As we made our way back to the forest's edge, I could hear the excited chatter of the crowd. People were already making plans to attend the council meeting, discussing ways to spread the word about what they'd experienced. At the exit, Sarah and I stood side by side, thanking people as they left. The wonder in their eyes told me we'd made an impact. But would it be enough? A woman paused as she was leaving, her face thoughtful. "You know," she said, "I've lived near this forest my whole life, but I never knew. I never imagined." She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. "I'll be at that council meeting, and I'm bringing everyone I know." As the last of the visitors departed, Sarah turned to me, her eyes wide. "Jake, that was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. Do you think it worked?" I looked out over the now quiet forest, feeling its ancient power thrumming through me. "I hope so, Sarah. We've shown them the magic. Now it's up to them to decide if it's worth saving." She slipped her hand into mine, squeezing gently. "Whatever happens, we've done something amazing tonight. You've done something amazing." I squeezed back, grateful for her unwavering support. As we walked back into the forest, I felt a mixture of hope and apprehension. The battle for Blackwood's future was far from over, but for the first time I felt like we had a real chance. The forest seemed to whisper its approval as we passed, leaves rustling in a non-existent breeze. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, in the aftermath of this magical night, I allowed myself to believe that we could succeed. That the guardian of Blackwood, with the help of its human allies, could protect this sacred place for generations to come. As the last echoes of the festival faded into the night, I embraced my role fully, both guardian and bridge between two worlds. Whatever the future held, I was ready to face it, with the ancient magic of Blackwood Forest by my side. The week following the night festival passed in a blur of activity. Sarah and I worked tirelessly, organizing petitions, preparing presentations, and rallying support for Blackwood Forest. The local media had picked up the story, running features on the magical night that had captivated the town. As the day of the city council meeting dawned, I stood at the edge of the forest, feeling its nervous energy mirroring my own. Sarah joined me, her face a mix of determination and worry. "Are you ready for this?" she asked, adjusting her blazer. I took a deep breath, centering myself. "As ready as I'll ever be. But remember, I can't be the one to speak. It has to come from the community." She nodded, understanding the delicate balance we were trying to maintain. "Don't worry. We've got a great lineup of speakers, and if things get dicey, the Blackwood Beast might make an appearance." I finished with a wry smile. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. As we arrived at the city hall, I was heartened to see a large crowd already gathering. Many wore green ribbons or carried signs with slogans like "Save Blackwood Magic" and "Nature over Highways." Inside the council chamber, the atmosphere was tense. On one side sat the proponents of the highway project, all crisp suits and polished presentations. On the other, our diverse group of forest supporters filled the seats. Mayor Thompson called the meeting to order, her gavel echoing through the packed room. "Today we'll be hearing arguments for and against the proposed Eastern Bypass project. We'll begin with a presentation from the development team." A sleek businessman named Mr. Hartley took the podium, armed with charts and projections. "Ladies and gentlemen, the Eastern Bypass is vital for our city's growth. It will reduce traffic congestion, create jobs, and bring in new businesses. Yes, we'll need to use a small portion of Blackwood Forest, but the economic benefits far outweigh the environmental cost." As he spoke, I could feel a ripple of unease go through our supporters. The businessman's arguments were polished, appealing to people's desire for progress and prosperity. Next, it was our turn. Sarah had organized a series of speakers, each sharing a different perspective on the forest's value. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a local biologist, went first. "Blackwood Forest isn't just a bunch of trees. It's a complex ecosystem, home to numerous rare species. The proposed highway would fragment this habitat, potentially leading to local extinctions." She was followed by Tom Baker, a lifelong resident. "I've been hiking in Blackwood since I was a boy. It's where I proposed to my wife, where my kids took their first nature walks. You can't put a price tag on those memories." As each person spoke, I could sense the mood in the room shifting. The council members leaned forward, listening intently, but it was Emma, the little girl from the nature walk, who truly captured everyone's attention. "Last week I saw real magic in the forest," she said, her young voice clear and confident. "I saw glowing mushrooms and dancing lights and a tree that told stories. If you build a road through Blackwood, you'll kill the magic. Please don't do that." Her simple, heartfelt plea brought tears to many eyes in the room. I felt a surge of hope, but knew the battle wasn't won yet. Mayor Thompson cleared her throat. Thank you all for your impassioned speeches. Before we vote, is there anyone else who wishes to speak? To everyone's surprise, Mr. Hartley stood up again. If I may, I'd like to address some of the concerns raised. As he began to speak, I felt a sudden shift in the forest's energy. Without warning, a gust of wind blew through the open windows, scattering papers and rustling clothes. The lights flickered, and for a brief moment the air seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly glow. Gasps of astonishment filled the room. I heard whispers of, "It's just like at the festival," and, "The forest is here." Mayor Thompson banged her gavel, trying to restore order. "Please, everyone calm down, it's just a power surge." But I knew better. The forest had made its presence felt, reminding everyone of the magic they'd witnessed. When the commotion died down, the mayor called for the vote. The tension in the room was palpable as each council member cast their ballot. By a vote of 7-2, Mayor Thompson announced, the council has decided to reject the Eastern Bypass project and designate Blackwood Forest as a protected nature reserve. The room erupted in cheers. Sarah threw her arms around me, laughing and crying at the same time. "We did it, Jake. We really did it." As the celebration continued around us, I slipped out of the building, needing a moment alone. I made my way to a small park across the street, where a few old trees stood sentinel. "Thank you," I whispered, placing my hand on the rough bark of an oak. I felt a warm pulse of energy in response, the forest's joy and gratitude flowing through me. Sarah found me there a few minutes later. "There you are. Everyone's looking for you. You're the hero of the hour, you know." I shook my head, smiling. "No, we all did this together. The forest, the community, you. I was just the bridge." She took my hand, her eyes shining. "So what's next for the Guardian of Blackwood?" I looked back towards the forest, feeling its ancient power calling to me. There's still so much work to do. Protecting the forest, teaching people about its wonders, maybe even exploring more of its magic. But right now, I trailed off as I spotted a familiar shape at the edge of the park, the white stag visible only to me, nodding its majestic head in approval before vanishing. "Right now," I continued, squeezing Sarah's hand, "I think it's time to celebrate. We've won a great victory today, not just for Blackwood, but for the idea that magic and wonder still have a place in our world." As we walked back to join the others, I felt a profound sense of peace. The path ahead was still uncertain, full of challenges and mysteries to unravel. But with the forest power flowing through me, the support of the community behind me, and Sarah by my side, I was ready to face whatever came next. The Guardian of Blackwood had truly found his purpose, bridging the world of ancient magic and modern reality. And this, I realized, was only the beginning of our story. The months following the City Council's decision were a whirlwind of activity. Blackwood Forest had become a local sensation, drawing curious visitors and researchers alike. As its guardian, I found myself busier than ever, balancing my duties to the forest with the growing public interest in its mysteries. On this particular autumn morning, I stood at the heart of Blackwood, feeling the changing seasons in the crisp air and the vibrant colors of the leaves. Sarah approached, her breath visible in the cool air. "Jake, you've got to see this," she said, excitement evident in her voice. "Dr. Rodriguez's team found something incredible." I followed her deeper into the forest, to a secluded glade I'd visited many times before. But today, it was transformed. A team of archaeologists carefully worked around what appeared to be ancient stone structures, partially hidden by centuries of growth. Dr. Rodriguez greeted us with a wide smile. "Ah, Jake, Sarah. Perfect timing. We've just uncovered something extraordinary." She led us to a central stone covered in faded carvings. As I approached, I felt a familiar tingle of energy, the forest's magic responding to my presence. "These markings," Dr. Rodriguez explained, "they're unlike anything we've seen in this region before. They seem to depict some kind of ritual or ceremony, centered around a figure we believe might be a forest guardian. I leaned in closer, my heart racing. The central figure in the carving bore a striking resemblance to my guardian form, part human, part beast, surrounded by swirling patterns that I recognized as representations of the forest's magic. How old do you think this is? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Dr. Rodriguez's eyes gleamed with scholarly excitement. Based on our initial carbon dating, these structures are at least 5,000 years old. This could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the early inhabitants of this area. As the archaeologists continued their work, I stepped back, my mind reeling. Sarah noticed my distress and pulled me aside. "Jake, what is it? You look like you've seen a ghost." I shook my head, struggling to find the words. "It's just, I always thought I was the first guardian, I mean, but this changes everything." Before Sarah could respond, a commotion from the dig site caught our attention. One of the younger archaeologists had uncovered something in the soil, a small, intricately carved stone figurine. As Dr. Rodriguez carefully cleaned it, I felt a jolt of recognition. The figurine depicted the white stag, the same mystical creature that had appeared to me multiple times since becoming the guardian. "Incredible," Dr. Rodriguez murmured. "This level of detail, the artistry, it's far beyond what we'd expect from this time period." As the team huddled around the new find, I felt a familiar presence. At the edge of the clearing stood the white stag, visible only to me, its eyes filled with ancient wisdom. "You knew," I thought, directing my words to the spectral creature. "You knew there were others before me." The stag's voice resonated in my mind. "The role of guardian is as old as the forest itself, Jake. You are the latest in a long line of protectors, each facing the challenges of their time." "But why wasn't I told?" I asked, a hint of frustration creeping into my thoughts. "Each guardian must find their own path," the stag replied. "The knowledge of those who came before can guide you, but it cannot define you. Your journey is your own." As the stag faded from view, I turned back to the excavation, seeing it with new eyes. These weren't just artifacts. They were echoes of my predecessors, guardians who had faced their own trials and triumphs. Sarah touched my arm gently. "Hey, you okay? You zoned out for a minute there." I nodded, a small smile forming. "Yeah, I'm good. Just processing." "Sarah, I think we've only scratched the surface of Blackwood's secrets." She grinned, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Well, that's what makes it exciting, right? So, oh wise guardian, what's our next move?" I chuckled at her playful tone, grateful for her unwavering support. "First, we need to make sure this site is properly protected. Then, I think it's time we started looking into the legends of the area. There might be more truth to them than we realized." As we discussed plans with Dr. Rodriguez to secure and study the site, I felt a new sense of purpose settling over me. The weight of being the guardian no longer felt so isolating. I was part of a legacy, a chain of protectors stretching back through millennia. That evening, as the archaeologists packed up for the day, I lingered in the glade. The setting sun painted the autumn leaves in hues of gold and red, and the air hummed with the forest's ancient magic. I placed my hand on the carved stone, feeling the connection to those who had come before. "I don't know if you can hear me," I said softly, "but I want you to know that I'll do my best to honor your legacy, to protect this forest as you did." A warm breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it a sense of approval and encouragement. In that moment, I felt truly connected to the guardians of the past, and to the timeless spirit of Blackwood itself. As I made my way back through the twilight forest, my mind buzzed with questions and possibilities. What challenges had the previous guardians faced? What wisdom had they left behind? And most importantly, what new threats might be looming on the horizon? I realized that my journey as the guardian was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning. With the support of Sarah, the community, and the ancient spirits of the forest, I was ready to delve deeper into the mysteries of Blackwood and to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The forest whispered around me, its secrets waiting to be uncovered. And I, Jake the Guardian, was ready to listen and learn. Winter had settled over Blackwood Forest, blanketing the trees in a pristine layer of snow. The archaeological site had been carefully covered and protected from the elements, but the discoveries made there continued to occupy my thoughts. I stood at the edge of a frozen lake, my breath visible in the crisp air. Sarah approached, 2 steaming mugs in her gloved hands. "Thought you could use some warmth," she said, offering me one of the mugs. "Hot chocolate with a dash of cinnamon, just the way you like it." I smiled gratefully, wrapping my hands around the warm ceramic. "Thanks, Sarah. You always know just what I need." We stood in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping our drinks and watching the snow gently fall. But I could sense Sarah had something on her mind. "All right, out with it," I said, giving her a knowing look. "What's bothering you?" She sighed, her expression turning serious. "Jake, have you seen the news? There's a new development company in town, Apex Industries. They're making a lot of noise about untapped resources in the area." I frowned, feeling a familiar sense of unease. "Let me guess, they're eyeing Blackwood?" Sarah nodded grimly. "Not just eyeing. They've already submitted proposals for sustainable resource extraction. It's all very vague, but we both know what that usually means," I finished. "Logging, mining, who knows what else." As if in response to our concerns, a cold wind whipped across the lake, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. The forest around us seemed to grow darker, more oppressive. Suddenly, a piercing cry split the air. We both looked up to see a massive eagle soaring overhead, its wingspan easily twice that of any bird I'd ever seen. As it passed, I felt a jolt of recognition. This was no ordinary eagle, but another manifestation of the forest spirit. "Jake," Sarah whispered, her eyes wide. "Did you see the size of that thing?" I nodded, my mind racing. "I think the forest is trying to tell us something. Come on, we need to go to the heart of Blackwood." We trekked through the snow-covered forest, the unusually large tracks of the eagle leading the way. As we neared the ancient oak where I had first encountered the white stag, the air grew thick with magic. The eagle was perched on a low branch, its intelligent eyes fixed upon us. As we approached, it spread its wings and transformed, shimmering and shifting until the white stag stood before us. Sarah gasped, seeing the mystical creature for the first time. "It's real," she breathed. "All this time I believed you, but seeing it..." The stag's voice resonated in both our minds. The forest faces a grave threat, one that cannot be fought with protests or legal battles alone. "Apex Industries," I said, my suspicions confirmed. "But what are they really after? Surely they must know the forest is protected now." The stag's eyes seemed to darken. "They seek something far more valuable than timber or minerals. They seek the source of Blackwood's magic itself." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the winter cold. How is that possible? I thought the magic was, well, everywhere in the forest. "The magic flows through all of Blackwood," the stag explained, "but it has a source, a wellspring of power hidden deep within the earth. If found and exploited, it could have catastrophic consequences not just for the forest, but for the world beyond." Sarah stepped forward, her face set with determination. "So what can we do? How do we stop them?" The stag turned its majestic head towards her. "You, Sarah, must use your skills to uncover the truth behind Apex Industries. Follow the trail of money and secrets. As for you, Jake..." I straightened, ready to face whatever challenge lay ahead. "What do you need me to do?" "You must delve deeper into your role as guardian," the stag said. "The carvings you discovered are but a fragment of the knowledge left by your predecessors. You must find the rest, and quickly. Within that ancient wisdom lies the key to protecting the wellspring." As the stag spoke, images flashed through my mind, Hidden caves, forgotten glades, and buried temples, all holding pieces of the puzzle we needed to solve. "I understand," I said, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on my shoulders. "But how will I know where to look?" The stag's form began to shimmer and fade. "Trust in the forest and in yourself. The path will reveal itself to those who are worthy." As the mystical creature disappeared, Sarah and I were left standing in the snowy clearing, the enormity of our task sinking in. "Well," Sarah said, a hint of her usual humor returning, "I guess my investigative journalism skills are about to get a real workout. Corporate espionage, here I come." I couldn't help but smile, grateful for her ability to find light even in dark situations. "Just be careful, okay? We don't know what these people are capable of." She nodded, her expression softening. "You too, Jake. This whole delving deeper thing sounds dangerous." I took her hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "We'll get through this, Sarah. Together, like we always do." As we made our way back through the winter woods, I felt a mix of anticipation and dread. The peace we had won for Blackwood seemed fragile now, threatened by forces we didn't fully understand, but I also felt a surge of determination. Whatever trials lay ahead, whatever secrets Blackwood still held, I was ready to face them. As guardian, as protector, and as a bridge between the world of magic and the world of humans, I would do whatever it took to keep the forest safe. The snow continued to fall softly around us, covering our tracks and transforming the forest into a winter wonderland. But beneath that serene surface, I knew a storm was brewing, one that would test not just me, but the very foundations of Blackwood itself. The weeks following our encounter with the white stag were a blur of activity. While Sarah delved into her investigation of Apex Industries, I found myself venturing deeper into Blackwood than ever before, searching for the hidden knowledge of past guardians. On this particular day, I stood at the mouth of a cave I'd never noticed before, hidden behind a curtain of vines and moss. The forest had led me here, subtle signs guiding my path, a bird's call that seemed just a little too deliberate, a pattern of leaves that formed an arrow when the wind blew just right. "Well," I muttered to myself, "no turning back now." I switched on my flashlight and stepped into the darkness. The air inside was cool and damp, heavy with the weight of centuries. As I moved deeper, my light revealed ancient carvings on the walls, symbols similar to those we'd found at the archaeological site, but more complex, more numerous. Suddenly, my phone buzzed, making me jump. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. "Sarah? You're breaking up a bit, but I can hear you." Her voice came through, tinged with excitement and static. "Jake, I've found something. Apex isn't just a development company. They're a front for something else. I've traced their funding to some seriously shady sources." I pressed the phone closer to my ear, straining to hear. "What kind of sources?" "The kind that..." Her voice cut out for a moment. "Occult research. Jake, I think they know about the magic. They're not just after resources, they're after..." The call dropped abruptly. I stared at the phone, a knot of worry forming in my stomach. "Sarah?" I tried calling back, but there was no signal. Torn between continuing my exploration and rushing back to check on Sarah, I took a deep breath, centering myself. I reached out with my guardian senses, feeling for any disturbance in the forest's energy. To my relief, I sensed no immediate danger. "She'll be okay," I reassured myself. "Sarah's smart. She knows how to handle herself." Pushing my worry aside, I pressed deeper into the cave. The passage narrowed, forcing me to squeeze through tight spaces. Just as I was beginning to wonder if I'd made a mistake, the tunnel opened up into a vast underground chamber. My flashlight beam seemed swallowed by the darkness, barely illuminating the edges of the space. But as I stepped further in, the chamber came to life. Bioluminescent fungi began to glow, spreading across the walls and ceiling like a living tapestry of light. In the center of the chamber stood a stone dais, and upon it, a sculpture that took my breath away. It depicted a figure much like myself in guardian form, but the face was different. Older, wiser, bearing the weight of centuries. As I approached, I felt a surge of energy. The sculpture's eyes began to glow, and a voice, ancient and powerful, echoed through the chamber and through my mind. Who seeks the wisdom of the guardians? I swallowed hard, gathering my courage. I do. I am Jake, the current guardian of Blackwood Forest. The glow intensified, and I felt as if the sculpture was looking into my very soul. Many have claimed that title, but few have truly understood its meaning. Are you worthy, Jake? Are you prepared to face the trials that lie ahead? I don't know if I'm worthy, I admitted, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to protect the forest. A rumbling laugh filled the chamber. Honesty. Good. It is not certainty we require in a guardian, but dedication and the willingness to learn. The sculpture's hand moved, revealing a small recess in the stone. Inside lay an amulet, glowing with an inner light. Take this, Jake. It contains the memories of guardians past, their triumphs, their failures, their wisdom, and their folly. Learn from them, for the challenges you face are greater than you know. With trembling hands, I reached out and took the amulet. As soon as my fingers touched it, visions flooded my mind. Flashes of ancient rituals, battles with dark forces, the ebb and flow of the forest's magic over centuries. When the vision subsided, I found myself on my knees, gasping for breath. The sculpture had returned to its original state. The glow faded from its eyes. Thank you, I whispered, clutching the amulet to my chest. I won't let you down. As I made my way back through the tunnel, my mind reeled with the new knowledge. The guardians of the past had faced threats I could barely comprehend. Dark sorcerers seeking to corrupt the forest's magic, invading armies trying to harness its power, and forces from beyond our world attempting to break through at the places where the veil was thin. But along with the daunting challenges, I also felt a new sense of connection and purpose. I wasn't alone in this fight. The wisdom of countless guardians was now at my fingertips, ready to guide me. As I emerged from the cave, blinking in the fading daylight, my phone buzzed again. Sarah's name flashed on the screen, and this time the call connected. Jake, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you for hours. Sarah, are you okay? I was worried when we got cut off. I'm fine, but Jake, we've got trouble. Apex isn't just researching the occult. They've got a team of, mystics or something. They're planning some kind of ritual at the old quarry on the edge of Blackwood. Tonight, I clutched the amulet tighter, feeling its power pulse in response to my rising determination. I'll be there. Whatever they're planning will stop them. As I raced through the darkening forest, the amulet's glow lighting my way, I knew that everything was about to change. The battle for Blackwood's soul was no longer a distant threat. It was here now, and I was the only thing standing between the forest's ancient magic and those who would exploit it. With the wisdom of past guardians flowing through me and the strength of the forest at my back, I prepared to face whatever darkness Apex Industries was about to unleash. The true test of my role as guardian was about to begin. Ilara's footsteps echoed through the abandoned hallways of the space station. The emergency lights cast an eerie red glow, intensifying the sense of dread that had settled in her stomach. She gripped her plasma rifle tightly, every shadow seeming to conceal a potential threat. Do you copy? She whispered into her comp unit. Static, crack response. Rounding a corner, Ilara nearly collided with a figure emerging from a seed passage. She raised her weapon instinctively, only to lower it when she recognized her crewmate. Nova, thank the stars, Ilara exhaled. I've been trying to reach you. Nova's usually pristine uniform was torn and stained. A nasty gash ran across. Her words were cut short by the sudden blare of alarms. Red warning lights began to flash, bathing the corridor in a hellish strobe effect. "Warning, hull breach detected in Sector 7, an automated voice announced. "Emergency lockdown protocols initiated." Nova cursed. "That's between us and the bridge." Ilara's mind raced. "The maintenance tunnels," she said suddenly. "We can use them to bypass the lockdown." They set off at a run, the station groaning and creaking around them. As they reached the access hatch for the maintenance tunnels, Nova paused. "Ilara," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. "If we don't make it..." She cut him off. "We're going to make it, Nova. All of us left. We have to." The hatch opened with a hiss, revealing a cramped, dimly lit passageway. As they crawled through, Ilara's mind wandered to the events that had led to this nightmare. It had started as a routine deep space survey mission. Their ship, the Stargazer, had picked up an unusual energy signature emanating from an uncharted sector. Captain Thorne had decided to investigate, despite some crew members' misgivings. They'd found a derelict alien vessel, massive and ancient. The decision to board it had been unanimous. The potential scientific discoveries were too great to ignore. But something had gone terribly wrong. Ilara's reminiscence was interrupted by Nova's sharp intake of breath. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. She strained her ears, picking up a faint scratching sound. It was getting closer. "Move!" Ilara hissed, scrambling forward as fast as the confined space would allow. They burst out of the maintenance tunnel into a small control room, slamming the hatch behind them. Nova quickly engaged the manual lock. "That won't hold them for long," he panted. Ilara was already at the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys. "If I can just..." There! The main screen flickered to life, showing a schematic of the station. Large sections were flashing red, indicating severe damage or alien presence. "The bridge is still green," Ilara said, a glimmer of hope in her voice. "If we can get there, we might be able to send a distress signal." Nova studied the schematic. "We'll have to go through the hydroponics bay. It's risky, but it's our best shot." As they prepared to leave, a bone-chilling shriek erupted from behind the sealed hatch. The metal began to buckle and warp. "Time to go," Nova said grimly, readying his weapon. They sprinted down the corridor towards hydroponics, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. As they burst into the vast chamber filled with plants and mist, Ilara allowed herself a moment of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could turn this nightmare around. But as the doors slid shut behind them, cutting off the alien shrieks, a new sound filled the air. A low, menacing growl emanated from the dense foliage ahead. Nova and Ilara exchanged a look of grim determination. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The battle for survival, and for the fate of humanity, was far from over. The ancient library of Aldoria loomed before Lyra, its weathered stone facade etched with symbols from a long-forgotten age. She hesitated at the entrance, her hand hovering over the ornate door handle. "Are you sure about this?" Kai asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Once we go in, there's no turning back." Lyra met his gaze, determination glinting in her eyes. "We don't have a choice. The answers we need are in there, and time is running out." With a deep breath, she pushed open the heavy doors. The musty scent of old parchment and dust enveloped them as they stepped into the cavernous hall. Rows upon rows of towering bookshelves stretched as far as the eye could see, their contents holding the accumulated knowledge of centuries. "Where do we even start?" Kai wondered aloud, his voice echoing in the vast space. Lyra pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from her pocket, smoothing it against a nearby table. "According to the map Eldrick gave us, the scroll we're looking for should be in the restricted section near the back." They made their way through the labyrinth of shelves, their footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust coating the floor. As they neared the restricted section, a faint blue glow caught Lyra's attention. "Look," she whispered, pointing to a shimmering barrier blocking their path. "A protection spell." Kai reached out, only to have his hand repelled by an invisible force. "Any ideas on how to get past it?" Lyra closed her eyes, concentrating on the magical energy surrounding them. Slowly, she began to chant in an ancient tongue, her voice growing stronger with each word. The air around them crackled with power, and the barrier flickered before dissipating entirely. "Impressive," Kai said with a grin. "I'm glad you paid attention during those magical theory lessons." Lyra rolled her eyes but couldn't suppress a smile. "Come on, we need to hurry." They delved deeper into the restricted section, scanning the shelves for anything that might lead them to the prophecy. Suddenly, Kai called out, "Lyra, I think I found something." She rushed over to where he stood, staring at a small, unassuming scroll tucked between two massive tomes. With trembling hands, Lyra carefully unrolled the delicate parchment. "This is it," she breathed, her eyes wide. The humid air of the hydroponics bay clung to Ilara's skin as she and Nova crept forward, weapons raised. The growl they'd heard moments ago had faded, but the eerie silence that followed was almost worse. "I don't like this," Nova whispered, his eyes darting between the rows of lush vegetation. "It's too quiet." Ilara nodded, her grip tightening on her plasma rifle. "Stay close. We need to—" A blur of motion to their left cut her off. Nova spun, firing a quick burst into the foliage. Something screeched, the sound unnervingly familiar yet alien. "Run!" Ilara shouted, grabbing Nova's arm and pulling him towards the far exit. They sprinted through the artificial jungle, the sounds of pursuit growing louder behind them. Vines and leaves whipped at their faces as they ran, the mist-filled air making it difficult to see more than a few meters ahead. Suddenly Nova stumbled, crying out in pain. Ilara skidded to a halt, turning to see a vine-like tendril wrapped around his ankle, pulsing with an otherworldly glow. "It's got me!" Nova yelled, struggling to free himself. Ilara aimed her rifle, but hesitated. The risk of hitting Nova was too high. Instead, she pulled out her combat knife and began sawing at the tendril. "Hold still," she grunted, the alien plant matter proving surprisingly tough. Nova's eyes widened in horror. "Ilara, behind you." She whirled just in time to see a grotesque insectoid creature lunging at her. Its mandibles clicked furiously as it sailed through the air. Ilara raised her arm instinctively, and the creature's teeth sank into her forearm instead of her throat. Crying out in pain and fury, Ilara smashed the butt of her rifle into the creature's head repeatedly until it released its grip and fell away. Without missing a beat, she turned back to Nova, finally managing to sever the tendril holding him. "Thanks," Nova gasped as Ilara helped him to his feet. "That was too close." "We're not out of this yet," Ilara replied grimly, eyeing the wound on her arm. "Come on, the exit's just ahead." They resumed their sprint, the sounds of alien pursuit growing ever closer. As they approached the hydroponics bay exit, Ilara's heart sank. The door was sealed shut, a red warning light blinking ominously above it. "No, no, no," she muttered, frantically working the door controls. "It's locked down. We're trapped." Nova pressed his back against the door, raising his weapon. "Then we make our stand here." The chittering and screeching grew louder as shadows moved among the plants. Ilara and Nova stood side by side, weapons ready, prepared to face whatever horrors emerged. But instead of an attack, a familiar voice crackled over their comms. "Ilara, Nova, do you copy?" Ilara's eyes widened in disbelief. "Zeke, is that you?" "Thank the stars." Zeke's voice came through, filled with relief. "I've been trying to reach anyone for hours. I'm on the bridge, but I'm locked out of most systems." "Zeke, listen carefully," Nova said urgently. "We're trapped in hydroponics. The whole bay is infested. You need to override the lockdown on the exit door." There was a pause, filled only by the sound of Zeke's fingers flying over a keyboard. "I'm trying, but the system's fighting me. Whatever these things are, they've integrated with the station's tech somehow." Ilara fired a warning shot as an alien form began to emerge from the mist. "Work faster, Zeke. We're running out of time." "Almost got it," Zeke exclaimed. The door behind them hissed open. Ilara and Nova backpedaled through it, firing continuously to keep the advancing horde at bay. As soon as they were through, Zeke sealed it shut again. "We're clear," Ilara panted, leaning against the wall. "Zeke, you're a lifesaver." "Don't thank me yet," Zeke replied grimly. "I've got a visual on the bridge security feeds. These things, they're not just on the station. They're trying to interface with our systems, rewriting our protocols. If they succeed," Nova finished the thought, "they could potentially spread to every connected system in human space." Ilara straightened, a new determination in her eyes. "Then we stop them here. Zeke, what's the quickest route to the bridge?" As Zeke began to outline their path, Ilara caught Nova's eye. They shared a silent moment of understanding. The odds were stacked against them, but they had no choice. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. "Let's move," Ilara said, checking her weapon. "We've got a station to reclaim and a species to save." With renewed purpose, they set off towards the bridge, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. The battle for the Stargazer, and perhaps the future of humanity, had entered its final, desperate phase. Ilara and Nova moved swiftly through the dimly lit corridors of the Stargazer, guided by Zeke's voice in their earpieces. The station groaned and shuddered around them, as if in pain. "Take the next left," Zeke instructed. "But be careful. I'm picking up multiple heat signatures ahead." Nova readied his weapon. "How many?" "At least 5, Zeke replied, his voice tense. "Maybe more. The readings are strange." As they rounded the corner, Ilara held up a hand, signaling Nova to stop. Ahead, the corridor opened into a larger chamber, the central hub connecting the station's main sectors, and it was crawling with aliens. "Zeke," Ilara whispered, "we're going to need another route. The hub is overrun." There was a moment of silence before Zeke responded, his voice hesitant. "There isn't another way, Ilara. Not one that'll get you here in time. The aliens are spreading through the station's systems too quickly. If we don't stop them soon..." Nova and Ilara exchanged a grim look. "Understood," Nova said. "We'll find a way through." They crouched at the entrance to the hub, observing the alien creatures. They moved with an unsettling mix of insectoid skittering and almost human-like purposefulness, interfacing with the station's systems through tendrils that seemed both organic and technological. "Look," Ilara pointed. "They're focused on that main console. If we can create a diversion on the opposite side of the room..." Nova nodded, understanding her plan. "I'll draw their attention. You make a run for the bridge access corridor." "No," Ilara said firmly. "We do this together or not at all." Before Nova could argue, a new voice crackled over their comms, distorted and barely audible, but unmistakable. "This, Captain Thorne. Anyone copy?" Ilara's heart leapt. "Captain, we thought you were..." "Not dead yet." Thorne's voice came through, stronger this time. "Trapped. Engineering. The aliens. They're not just invading. They're transforming the station, merging with it." Nova's brow furrowed. "Captain, can you make it to the bridge?" There was a long pause before Thorne responded, her voice heavy with resignation. "Negative, I'm contained. But I can still access some systems. I have a plan, but I need you on the bridge. Hurry." The communication cut out abruptly. Ilara and Nova shared a look of renewed determination. "All right," Ilara said, her mind racing. "New plan. We use the emergency fire suppressant system to flood the hub with foam. It should disorient them long enough for us to get through." Nova grinned. "I like it. Zeke, can you trigger the system remotely?" "Negative," Zeke replied. "Those controls are local only. You'll have to activate it manually." Ilara spotted the control panel near their position. "Cover me," she said to Nova, then sprinted towards it. The aliens noticed her immediately, screeching in alarm. Nova opened fire, his plasma bolts cutting through the air and forcing the creatures to take cover. Ilara reached the panel, her fingers flying over the controls. Come on," she muttered. With a loud hiss, White foam began pouring from nozzles in the ceiling. The hub quickly filled with the thick substance, obscuring vision and muffling sound. The alien creatures shrieked in confusion. "Now!" Ilara yelled. She and Nova plunged into the foam-filled room, relying on Zeke's directions to guide them. They could hear the aliens thrashing about, but the suppressant had done its job, leaving the creatures disoriented. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged on the other side, covered in foam, but unharmed. The bridge access corridor stretched before them. "We made it," Nova panted, a note of disbelief in his voice. Ilara allowed herself a small smile. "Not yet, but we're close. Zeke, we're approaching the bridge now. Be ready to let us in." As they neared the bridge doors, a horrifying screech echoed behind them. Turning, they saw a massive alien form emerge from the foam, larger and more grotesque than any they'd encountered before. "Into the bridge now!" Ilara shouted. The doors slid open, and they dove through just as the creature lunged. Zeke sealed the entrance behind them, the sound of the alien's impact reverberating through the metal. Inside the bridge, Zeke greeted them with visible relief. "You made it," he said, helping them to their feet. Ilara nodded, catching her breath. "Barely. Now let's contact the captain and figure out how to end this nightmare." As they turned to the main console, the view screen flickered to life. Captain Thorne's face appeared, but something was terribly wrong. Tendrils of alien matter seemed to be growing from her skin, her eyes glowing with an unnatural light. "I'm glad you made it," Thorne said, her voice a disturbing mixture of human and alien tones. "Now we can begin the true transformation. All of humanity will join us in perfection." The trio on the bridge stared in horror as the realization dawned. Their mission to save the station had just become infinitely more complicated, and the fate of their entire species now hung in the balance. The bridge of the Stargazer fell silent as Captain Thorne's transformed visage loomed on the view screen. Ilara, Nova, and Zeke exchanged looks of horror and disbelief. Ilara was the first to find her voice. "Captain, what happened to you?" Thorne's lips curled into an unsettling smile, the alien tendrils on her face writhing. "I've been enlightened, Ilara. These beings, they're not our enemies. They're our future." Nova stepped forward, his hand instinctively moving to his weapon. "This isn't you talking, Captain. They've done something to your mind." "On the contrary, Nova," Thorne replied, her voice eerily calm. "My mind has never been clearer. The alien consciousness has shown me the truth. Our species has reached its limit. It's time for us to evolve." Zeke worked furiously at a console, his fingers flying over the keys. "I'm trying to isolate her signal," he whispered to Ilara. "If I can cut the connection—" "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Zeke," Thorne interrupted, her glowing eyes shifting to him. "The transformation has already begun. Cutting me off won't stop what's coming." As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. Zeke's eyes widened as he read the incoming data. She's right. The alien biomass is spreading through the station at an exponential rate. It's rewriting our systems on a molecular level. Ilara's mind raced, searching for a solution. "Captain, listen to me. We can find another way. Whatever these aliens have promised you, it's not worth sacrificing our humanity." Thorne's expression softened, almost pitying. "Oh, Ilara, always the idealist. This isn't a sacrifice, it's a gift. Imagine a world without pain, without conflict, a unified consciousness spanning the stars. At the cost of everything that makes us human," Nova interjected fiercely. "Our individuality, our free will. Small prices to pay for perfection," Thorne countered, "but I can see you're not ready to understand. No matter, soon you won't have a choice." The view screen went dark, leaving the trio alone with the blaring alarms and flashing emergency lights. Zeke's voice was tight with panic. "We're running out of time. The alien biomass will reach the bridge in minutes. Once it does, we become like Thorne," Ilara finished grimly. She turned to her companions, determination etched on her face. "There has to be a way to stop this. Zeke, What about the station's self-destruct? Zeke shook his head. The aliens have locked us out of those systems. We can't activate it from here. Nova's eyes lit up with a dangerous idea. What about the reactor core? If we could cause a meltdown, we could destroy the station and the aliens with it, Ilara finished, nodding. But we'd need to get to engineering, and we'd be cutting it close to escape ourselves. It's our only shot, Nova insisted. Zeke looked up from his console, his face pale. There's another problem. The alien biomass. It's not just on the station. I'm picking up readings from the planet below. It's spreading there too. The weight of the situation settled over them like a suffocating blanket. It wasn't just about saving themselves or even the station anymore. The fate of an entire world, potentially the entire human race, rested on their next decision. Ilara took a deep breath, steeling herself. All right, here's the plan. Zeke, you stay here. Try to slow the aliens' progress and maintain communication with us. Nova and I will fight our way to engineering. And then what? Zeke asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Then we overload the reactor, Ilara said firmly. We'll use the escape pods to get clear of the blast. The explosion should be enough to destroy the station and sterilize the affected areas on the planet. Nova nodded grimly. It's a long shot, but it's all we've got. As they prepared to leave, Ilara placed a hand on Zeke's shoulder. If we don't make it back, launch the pods. Get word to Earth about what happened here. They need to be prepared. Zeke swallowed hard but nodded. Good luck, and come back alive, okay? Ilara managed a small smile. We'll do our best. With a final look at each other, Ilara and Nova stepped towards the bridge doors. As they slid open, revealing the chaos beyond, Ilara felt a mix of fear and resolve settle in her chest. Whatever lay ahead, whatever horrors they would face, she knew one thing for certain. This was humanity's last stand, and they couldn't afford to fail. The moment Ilara and Nova stepped out of the bridge, they were plunged into a nightmarish landscape. The once familiar corridors of the Stargazer had been transformed into something alien and organic. Pulsing tendrils lined the walls, floor, and ceiling, giving the unsettling impression that they were walking through the innards of some vast living creature. Stay sharp, Ilara whispered, her plasma rifle at the ready. We don't know what these things are capable of now. Nova nodded, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Engineering is 5 levels down. We should take the emergency stairwell. It'll be harder for them to ambush us there. They moved swiftly but cautiously, the squelching of the biomass beneath their feet setting their nerves on edge. As they approached the stairwell, Zeke's voice crackled over their comms. Ilara, Nova, do you copy? I've got bad news. Ilara's heart sank. Go ahead, Zeke. The alien biomass is adapting faster than I anticipated. It's learning from our systems, evolving. I don't know how much longer I can hold them off from the bridge controls. Nova cursed under his breath. How long do we have? There was a pause before Zeke responded, his voice tight with stress. Best estimate? 20 minutes before they gain full control of all ship systems. After that, we become part of the hive mind. Ilara finished grimly. Understood. We're double timing it to engineering. They picked up their pace, practically flying down the stairs. The further they descended, the more oppressive the alien presence became. By the time they reached the engineering level, the air was thick with spores, forcing them to activate their suits' emergency oxygen supplies. As they approached the main reactor chamber, a bone-chilling screech echoed through the corridors. Nova and Ilara pressed themselves against the wall, weapons raised. Did you see where that came from? Nova whispered. Ilara shook her head, her eyes scanning the pulsating organic mass around them. Suddenly, a section of the wall bulged outward, taking on a vaguely humanoid shape. With horror, Ilara realized it was a crew member, partially absorbed into the alien biomass. Help! Me! The figure gurgled, reaching out with a hand that was more tentacle than human. Nova raised his weapon, but Ilara stopped him. Wait, that's Chen from engineering. He might know how to access the reactor controls. Cautiously, Alara approached the trapped crew member. Chen, it's Alara. We're here to stop this. Can you tell us how to overload the reactor? Chen's eyes, the only part of him that still looked human, focused on Alara with difficulty. Manual. Override. In the control room. But the Queen, she guards it. Queen? Nova asked, alarmed. What Queen? But Chen's eyes had already glazed over, his form melting back into the writhing mass of the wall. Alara stepped back, her jaw set with determination. Looks like we've got a new problem to deal with, she said. They pressed on, finally reaching the entrance to the reactor control room. The door had been torn away, replaced by a pulsating membrane. As they approached, it parted like a grotesque curtain, revealing the horror within. The control room had been transformed into a nightmarish throne room, and there, perched atop a mound of writhing biomass, sat Captain Thorne, or what used to be Captain Thorne. Her body had grown to monstrous proportions, her limbs elongated into razor-sharp appendages. Her eyes, now multiplied across her twisted face, all turned to focus on the newcomers. Ah, my wayward crew, Thorne's voice echoed, both in the air and somehow inside their minds. Have you come to join us in our glorious evolution? Alara raised her weapon, her voice steady despite her fear. We've come to end this, Captain, for the sake of humanity. Thorne's mouth split into a wide, inhuman grin. Humanity? Such a limited concept. We are beyond humanity now. We are the future. As if on cue, the biomass around them surged to life. Tentacles lashed out, seeking to ensnare them. Nova opened fire, his plasma bolts searing through the alien flesh. Alara, the controls! He shouted over the din of battle. I'll hold them off. Alara nodded, making a dash for the reactor control panel. As her fingers flew over the keys, initiating the overload sequence, she felt a presence in her mind. Thorne, trying to invade her thoughts. Join us, Alara, the voice whispered seductively. Embrace perfection. With a supreme effort of will, Alara pushed the alien consciousness out of her mind. Never, she growled, slamming her hand down on the final authorization button. Alarms blared as the reactor began its irreversible march towards meltdown. Thorne let out an otherworldly shriek of rage and frustration. Nova, let's go, Alara yelled, grabbing her companion and pulling him towards the exit. As they ran, dodging tentacles and leaping over pulsating masses of alien flesh, Alara allowed herself a moment of hope. They had done it. The station would be destroyed, taking the alien threat with it. But as they raced towards the escape pods, a new, chilling realization dawned on her. This battle was far from over. In fact, it might just be the beginning of a war for the very soul of humanity. Alara and Nova sprinted through the mutating corridors of the Stargazer, the station's alarms blaring in their ears. The reactor meltdown sequence had begun, and they had precious little time to reach the escape pods. Zeke, Alara shouted into her comm. We've initiated the meltdown. What's your status? Static crackled for a moment before Zeke's voice came through, strained and breathless. The bridge is compromised. I've sealed myself in the auxiliary control room. The pods are prepped and ready for launch. Nova ducked as a tendril whipped over his head. Can you make it to the pods? There was a pause before Zeke responded, his voice heavy with resignation. Negative. I'm cut off. But listen, I can use the aux controls to give you a clear path. It's your only shot. Alara's heart sank. Zeke, no. There has to be another way. There isn't, Zeke insisted. Someone needs to stay behind to ensure the station is destroyed. I'm already exposed to the spores. I can feel them changing me. This is my choice, Alara. Tears stung Alara's eyes as they rounded another corner. Zeke, No time for goodbyes, Zeke interrupted. Just promise me you'll stop this. Whatever it takes. Nova grabbed Alara's arm, pulling her forward as the ceiling behind them collapsed in a mass of writhing tentacles. We promise, Zeke. Your sacrifice won't be in vain. They could hear the smile in Zeke's voice as he spoke his final words. Give 'em hell for me. The comm went silent. Ilara allowed herself one moment of grief before steeling her resolve. They had a mission to complete. As they neared the pod bay, the ship's transformation became even more pronounced. The walls pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, and the air was thick with spores. Their suit filters were working overtime, but Ilara knew they couldn't last much longer. There, Nova pointed ahead. The entrance to the pod bay was visible, a beacon of hope in the organic nightmare. But as they approached, a familiar figure stepped out to block their path. It was Chen, the engineer they had encountered earlier. Only now, his transformation was complete. His body was a grotesque fusion of human and alien, tentacles writhing where his arms should be. Join us, Chen gurgled, his voice a chorus of inhuman tones. Embrace the future. Nova raised his weapon, but Ilara stopped him. Chen, if you're still in there, please let us pass. We can help you. For a moment, something flickered in Chen's eyes, a spark of his former self. But it was quickly extinguished, replaced by an alien hunger. There is no more Chen, the creature hissed. Only us. It lunged forward with shocking speed. Nova opened fire, his plasma bolts searing through alien flesh. Ilara ducked under a swinging tentacle, rolling past the creature and towards the pod bay door. Nova, come on, she yelled, slapping the door control. Nova backed up, still firing. As soon as he cleared the threshold, Ilara slammed the emergency lock. Chen's inhuman screech of rage was cut off as the reinforced doors slid shut. They stumbled into the pod bay, gasping for breath. The last remaining escape pod sat ready, its hatch open invitingly. As they climbed in, the ship's AI announced over the speakers. Warning, critical reactor failure imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. Ilara strapped herself into the pilot seat, her fingers flying over the controls. Hang on, she warned Nova. This is going to be rough. The pod shot out of the bay like a bullet from a gun. Through the view screen, they watched as the Stargazer grew smaller behind them, its once sleek form now a twisted, pulsating mass. Suddenly, a massive tentacle erupted from the ship's hull, reaching for their pod. Ilara jerked the controls, narrowly avoiding its grasp. It's the Queen, Nova realized with horror. She's trying to stop us. More tentacles burst forth, turning space around them into a deadly obstacle course. Ilara's world narrowed to the controls in front of her, every maneuver a dance between life and death. Just as it seemed they might escape, a tentacle clipped their pod, sending them into a spin. Alarms blared as they tumbled through space, the Stargazer looming ever larger in their view screen. Brace for impact, Ilara yelled, fighting with the controls. At that moment, the Stargazer's reactor finally gave way. The ship exploded in a blinding flash of light and energy, the shockwave catching their pod and hurling it further into space. As darkness claimed her, Ilara's last conscious thought was a question. Had they truly escaped, or was this just the beginning of a much larger nightmare?